This is 4200%. Build, scale, sell. The playbook for entrepreneurs who mean business. No fluff, no theory, just bold moves, real strategies, and the unfiltered truth from founders who built it, scaled it, and sold it. If you're ready to grow fast and exit strong, you're in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of 4200% Build, Scale, Sell. I have the pleasure of introducing to you guys the CEO of US Aviation, Mike Sykes. Mike, welcome, and thanks for joining me on the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. My pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to talk with you. So, let's dive right into it. How did you get started just in business in general? Like as a kid, or did you just fall into it?
Kind of inherited it. So I did grow up in a family that my father had a business. And in fact, so all my life watching him run a business. Ultimately, after college, I went to work for him. And so really all my life has been in a family-oriented entrepreneurial type of arrangement or opportunities.
I love that. What is some of the earliest things you can remember as being an entrepreneur, even working in your family's business?
Man, there's a whole host of things we could think about. One is, it never stops. Once you get involved, it's 24/7. It's on your mind. You're thinking about it. Not that you're working 24/7, but you're always thinking about business. How do I make it better? How do I grow? How do I develop? How do I take it to the next step?
I love that. No, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's probably one of the key things there, right? Is you don't leave business at work, right? It comes home with you. It takes a part of you. You're working on it, even in your mind, 24/7. So I absolutely love that. Right. What was your family's business, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so it was financial services. We did accounting and payroll services.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah. Did you do the books when you were there, or?
So my degree was in accounting. So like most family business, you're going to work every part of the business, and so I did both bookkeeping, accounting, working kind of in the behind the scenes on the clients' books, but also sales. So it's very much a marketing organization, going out and getting new clients, servicing clients, going out and meeting with clients. So all aspects of the business, income tax preparation. So, we had to do it all over the years.
I love that. So you're going to get business, it sounds like. Do you have a story maybe of a time that you went to go get business, and was it either an interesting story or maybe it didn't go so well?
The fun thing about that particular business was that our business was serving other small businesses. And so you always got to hear their stories. You ask them, how did you get involved in this business? And the odd businesses, you're like, man, I didn't know that this business even existed. There's enough activity around this type of business. Or, one, in fact, the owner became a family friend, but it was a diaper service. So, he provided cloth diapers to homeowners, to new families. And it's like, wow, that's a business, That's
amazing.
So things like that just made it fun and interesting, is just getting to meet so many people and hearing their stories.
That's amazing. So you're working in a family business. What would a high school friend describe you as?
I was the quiet, shy kid, actually. Yeah. So, kind of kept to myself. I think everybody's a good listener, but that's because I'm not a big talker.
Yeah, I love that, though. I mean, I'm much of the same. If you don't know, I love to listen. And, but, listeners have the great stories, I think, especially, again, who knew that cloth diapers would be a business?
Yeah.
And then, you'd learn, if you will, kind of everybody's business while doing your family's business.
Absolutely. Yes.
So much fun. How'd you get into planes? How'd you get into airplanes?
Yeah. So the family business that I started in, we ran that for a number of years, ultimately sold that to Intuit, the makers of QuickBooks and Quicken and their services. And after that transaction, I went to work for them for a few years and quickly decided that I was not a good fit for a big business, corporate, publicly traded company. And that whole environment was not really my cup of tea. So after a few years, left there and then looking for something else to get involved in. And myself and another gentleman who was involved with me in the prior business, kind of looking for an opportunity. We weren't looking for an aviation business, but that was kind of the door that opened up. We both were pilots, but again, we weren't looking for an aviation business. But we came across an opportunity of a small maintenance shop After we started digging in, we realized, well, that's not really a business. It's a one-man shop. That's not really a business.
Right.
But as we were talking to the owners, like, well, maybe if we could find a flight school or something that we could add to this, that maybe that'd make it a business. And as it turns out, he said, well, I think the flight school on this field, this airport is also might be for sale.
Hmm.
And so one conversation led to another, and sure enough, the little flight school, 3-airplane business was also about to go out of business in reality, but we ended up buying both of those businesses, putting them together, and that was the genesis of creating US Aviation Academy.
That is amazing. So you weren't even looking for that. You were looking at getting into business. You've got the maintenance shop. And then, of course, we need something else. We got the flight school to go with it. Did you actually accept planes outside of US Aviation Academy?
When we began, we really didn't know what aspect of aviation that we would focus on. So we had the little maintenance shop, we had the flight school. And so, yes, we were working on other people's airplanes. So we were doing what we call outside maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, we tried to expand that. We also got into being the FBO, so the fuel provider at the field. And so we explored different areas, but in the end, really the focus became the flight training. Some number of years down the road, we stopped taking outside aircraft, said, we're busy enough just working on our own airplanes. And again, the focus became the training side of aviation.
I love that. And of course, that's going to be the main part of what we're going to talk about. You started, as you said, with 3 planes and a flight school. How was the beginning years? Was it challenging? Tell me some stories about those times.
Yeah. So, again, not knowing what we were getting into and where the end path was, we didn't have a set destination. Say, hey, we want to be this great flight school. We just said, we're going to explore aviation. And candidly, myself and the other gentleman who started with me, he's a little bit older than I am, and so we weren't really looking for a business that was going to consume all of our time. We're thinking, kind of a part-time thing. We can run it on the side here, and work a few days a week, and be a nice kind of retirement type of thing here, but that excitement starts to kick in, and you're like, what can we do with this business? And so pretty soon it did become something like, I think there's some opportunities here to really develop and scale this business. And so we began to pour more into it and grow it. And probably one of the big turning points for us. So we started the business in January of 2006. In late 2008, we got an opportunity to start training students from China.
Oh, well.
And that began a very rapid point of expansion for us.
How did you deal with that expansion? So you now get Chinese nationals come here to train, and I imagine that's an influx of students. What do you do?
Yeah, so now you've got to think about all of the elements that go along with that. So you've got to have aircraft, and so that's a little bit capital intense. So how do you take care of that? And then all of the staff, so instructors, maintenance personnel, support personnel. Part of the contract was we had to provide their housing, we had to provide their transportation. So there's a lot of other logistics services that were part of that process, and so it really changed the nature of the business because you had so many components to it, besides just the core part of flight training. That began the process in real sincere effort of building the team, because it's way more than myself and my partner could kind of keep our arms around.
For sure. Who was your first hire? I would say, and when I asked that, who was your first hire that you were intentional of as you start your expansion? I need this person to take this to the next level.
Yeah, so 2 answers. Just one as a side note. I said, we bought this little maintenance shop. Then the gentleman who is the mechanic, our one mechanic, he was employee number 1 and still works for us today. So 20
Amazing.
years later. But from a strategic perspective, it was bringing in kind of the senior flight people who have real expertise in flight training. I'm a pilot, but I'm not a certified flight instructor. So I don't really know anything about teaching. I've, received teaching, but don't have that education side of it. So bringing in the team that has that expertise, providing the instruction, running a group of instructors. And so that was the first strategic, important role we had to get on the team.
I love that, and so, there's flight schools, of course, who, if they have their certificated flight instructor, then go teach, have a plane, teach a student. Sounds though you took a more intentional route in that sense. Like I'm going to get a team of people, and this person is going to direct those who will teach my students. Really, if you will, foresight, because at least there's definitely some standardization for sure. But as we can talk about, there's no real standardization. Like, there's no rule saying you must do A, B, and C.
Right.
Or you must teach the ACS or Airman certification standards. But other than that, it's an open book and on how you do it.
For sure, and under the arrangement which we were scaling for, it was under a contract that had very specific requirements. And so we had to meet those requirements, which included teaching English. So, we had to do aviation English. So it was a wide range of things beyond like the just core of aviation. So we had to look at it from an end-to-end perspective. And how do we teach all of these pieces, do it on a timely basis? So there was a calendar time we had to meet, doing it within a certain number of flight hours because we're only paid for a certain number of hours. So there was a lot of components to this to be successful under that contracting arrangement.
That's amazing. And I don't know if you want to talk about it. How do you come about to get the contract itself? Because I imagine, there's other flight schools in Texas, for instance, and they could have gone somewhere else, but sounds like they were really sold on what you had to offer.
Yeah. So kind of a funny story. Things never work out the way you expect. We first got kind of introduced to the concept. I had no idea that students from China were coming to the U.S. We were training some foreign students, but not under a contract with airlines, which what this was. But I got a call from a gentleman who was going to be meeting with a Chinese cargo company, and they were coming down to meet with, possibly bringing cargo into this airport that was pretty close to us. As this group was meeting with them, one of the conversations that they had was, "Hey, we need pilots. Do you know a good flight school in the area?" And they reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to come down and meet this team and talk about flight training?" Well, absolutely. And so I did. Ultimately took a trip to China, but that went nowhere. But along the way, the gentleman who made the introduction, he said, really, if you're going to go to China, it would be important for you to have business cards that are in Chinese when you get there. That shows respect and whatnot. It's okay. So I said, well, how do I do that? And he said, well, I got the person for you. Let me introduce you to this person. And so they developed the card, wrote it in Chinese, and then we had it printed and took this trip to China. Ultimately, that went nowhere. But this person that did the translation for us calls me a couple months later and said, I got a friend in California, and he's representing some airlines from China that need pilots, and they're looking for a flight school they partner. Would you be interested in talking to them? And I said, sure. And that's what led to us ultimately getting connected there. So it was the translator that was the connection point.
That is so fascinating, right? Yeah. You were going to China and you're trying to get business from there, bring them to your academy, and the translator is the connector that gets the business done here and has the friend in California.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Isn't it funny? I mean, how certain businesses, like as much as you plan and you want to, sometimes you get lucky.
Right. What you think's going to happen doesn't, but another opportunity, another door opens. And so it really took off. That became the growth engine behind the business for a number of years. The significant term was COVID. Mm-hmm. And so for us, and many businesses, almost every business in the country was impacted in a severe way by COVID. Some positive, most negative. And we were certainly on the negative side. A multi-step process there. First, it's denial, right? So we had these classes from China that were coming every 6 to 8 weeks or so. We were supposed to get a class in January of 2020. The airlines called and said, yeah, that's going to be delayed a little bit. We've got we got this flu thing happening out there. And so no big deal. Probably May or June before we said, you know what? They're never coming. And so what was 75 to 80% of our business at that time went to zero. Virtually overnight, so we never got another group of students from China. And so then it became a new focus. How do we replace this business? And how do we take it a different direction?
That's a great question. How did you? So you went from having, these Chinese national students really fueling your growth, scaling it, and then overnight, Nothing, but I'm sure you still have all the planes and all the expenses that go with a large flight school.
Absolutely. And fortunately, we had a large number of students on campus, and we were able to kind of complete their training. This program was about a 14-month training program. And so we were able to kind of work ourselves out of business, training these students. And as we sent them home, that replacement wasn't coming. But yeah, there was a real decision point is, do we scale back? As you said, we own all these aircraft. They cost money whether they're flying or not. We got to insure them. We've got the capital cost in them. We had facilities. We had staff. And so we really didn't want to throw in the towel and kind of pull our horns in. And so we said, how do we transform and replace these students with other students? And so the obvious answer is, well, we got to get stronger in the domestic side of the business. And so that became a full court press. Is we've got to get out there and do that. But we were really starting from zero, because for several years, a decade, we had not had to market to get students. And so had to develop a whole marketing team, figure out how to get out in front of the audience that's important to us. And that took time. Things happen along the way that really kind of help you that you didn't count on. And so if you think back in 2021, really, in 2022, if you listen to the news, virtually every week, they were talking about a pilot shortage. And so we had the media out there doing a great job of advertising our product. And so the focus became, well, people know that there's a need. We just got to point to them that we're a great option for them. And so that really helped propel our turnaround, is that fact that it became broadly known there was an opportunity there.
I love that. So how do you become broadly known? So you're focused mainly on Chinese nationals, and now you're moving towards, okay, let's get more domestic students in. And you mentioned this full court press. I mean, what were some of the steps that you did, even top one or two things that you did to get more students, get attention to US Aviation, and then, of course, get them into your school?
Yeah. So this is where, drawing back on my previous experience, I mentioned in our other business, part of what we had to do is we were a sales organization. We had to go out and win new customers, new businesses. And in that world, we did it door to door. We went business to business, knocked on doors, walked in and said, hey, I'm Mike Sykes, and here's what we do. And I'd like to talk to you about how we can help you out. And so I understood the concept of aggressive marketing, just how to get out there and meet people. And so what that taught me is sales is a numbers game. And so what we had to figure out is, how do we get a flow of leads coming in? And we know that, the bigger that funnel coming in, then that will yield a certain number of customers in the end. And so we, again, bring in expertise. So bringing in a strong sales leader, have that experience to know what that looks like, have someone who understands that concept, and then hiring some expertise on the marketing side, which is really, just online media, how to get out there, use the Google search ads and all that stuff, just to get the lead flow happening. So it's really kind of the nuts and bolts of sales and marketing.
I absolutely love that. So I love to ask this question as we start wrapping up a few questions. What does scaling mean to you?
So, specifically, if you look at our industry, there are, depending on who you ask, but somewhere around 1,500 flight schools in the country, most of which are ran by a person who is passionate about aviation and passionate about teaching aviation. And they're great people. They do a great job. But their focus and their love is teaching and flying. And it's really, really difficult to scale a business if you're wrapped up into the execution of the day-to-day yourself. And so we had the strategic advantage that I'm not, like I said, I'm not a CFI. I'm not a flight instructor. And so my focus was on growing the business. And so to scale the business for us meant, hey, bringing in that talent. As I said, bringing in the expert flight instructors, bringing in the maintenance team, and bringing in the sales team, but managing all of those pieces. And so making sure that, looking at the big picture, say, okay, we need students, we need aircraft, we need flight instructors, and we need a maintenance team to support it, and keeping all of those in balance. And so that was our focus on the management team, is, hey, we've got to be pulling all those pieces in and seeing how we can continue to add and grow each of those pieces day in and day out.
That was literally my next question. What advice would you give that person just starting out aviation, got one plane, getting students in the door, and he wants to become you?
Yeah. So, and I think that is the first question. What is your goal? If your goal is to because you love teaching and love being part of the business, you can make a nice living doing that. if you want to grow it to be much larger, then you've got to be willing to step away from that day-to-day part of it and say, I'm going to focus on, again, the bigger picture. And are you willing to make that trade-off? And so, sadly, it is a capital-intense business. And so do you have a path to get the resources? Because if you're going to grow in the flight training business, you have to add aircraft. And how are you going to do that? What's your plan? And do you have the resources? And so you need to understand it going in. You can make a nice living having a handful of airplanes and being, the kind of the center point of doing the teaching and running the business hands-on. Nothing wrong with that. And there are hundreds of businesses that do that and do that well. And again, nothing wrong with that. If you want to do something different, then you have to look at those pieces and say, am I willing to make this change in my daily life? And do I have the resources, and can I find the resources to support the growth?
Absolutely love that. And if our audience wants to contact you, we could throw your contact information in on our channel. Where would they find you, though, as well?
Yes, you can find us at www.usaviationacademy.com.
Mike, really appreciate having you on the show, and thanks for doing all you're doing. Excited to see what's next for US Aviation. And thanks for joining us on another podcast of 4200% Build, Scale, and Sell. See you later. Thanks for tuning in to 4200% Build, Scale, Sell. If you got value from today's episode, follow us on social media, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a review. It helps more entrepreneurs find the show. Until next time, build smart, scale fast, and sell on your terms.